There's material. There's a gesture towards the object. A movement on the object. A motion with the material. There's a pause, a rotating gaze. Years of observing. Black holes into a minute. Final project, idiosyncratic. If I give it to you or you buy it from me, it doesn't make you a materialist. Materialism is an ugly word. Materials shaped by nimble and inspired hands. Hands that know and never know is beauty. There's movement, there's an object, there's material, there's a gesture.
Action. Okay. All right, today we're going to do just a real simple sort of stamp that we're going to sort of carve, and then we'll be able to use this stamp for many other sort of uses, like we'll be able to create another stamp from it that we can use on clay, and then this one we're going to do some use it to set up some sand casting with glass, so we can make a glass cast basically of the stamp later on. So, so the first thing I want to do is just kind of, I'm going to have to throw out a slab. I'm going to cut some off, and I want to cut off a relatively thick piece because I want my little slab for the stamp to be about 3/4 inch thick or so. So I can just cut it off using my handy dandy sort of wire tool fishing line tied onto my popsicle stick, and then once I have that, I can sort of throw that out, or maybe if I'm lucky, I might not have to do all that much. I might just want to kind of throw it out a little bit, and then I can take a look at how thick it is. Take out my ruler and sort of measure. So I'm still at about 1 inch. So it could be a little thinner. Right, so I'm going to just kind of keep my edges tapped and compressed, and then throw it out a little bit more. Switch it so it extends out this way. We kind of keep it to be a little bit of a square. And then I'll take a look at where I'm at right there. It's still about 1 inch thick. It's probably thickest in the middle right now, so got a little more space here. So now I'm going to guess, and I'm about in there, so I'm under, under 1 inch, maybe a little bit more than 3/4, so 5/8, or 7/8, which would be fine, really perfect. And then I'm going to want to cut my sort of square out. So, I probably want it to be about, let's say for starters, I can cut it down a little bit more. But if I keep it at about 4 inches by 4 inches or so. So what I want to do is basically create a straight line somewhere. And I'm going to come, it's kind of thin right in here, so I'm going to sort of keep my straight edge there. So use my ruler. My old butter knife here, cut that. I really might want to be cutting on my sort of workboard here. And then now that I have this straight edge, I can come over and just measure off, mark it with, a nail or whatever I like to use. So measure 4 inches and 4 inches. All right, and now I can cut that. Now just come in, create another little straight edge about right there. That's the tapped, and then go 4 inches and 4 inches. So, all right, and then now I can mark my 4 inches and 4 inches, and really you should always measure a second time, double check that you're did it right. They say measure twice, cut once. So now that I'm going to put this stuff back in my bag with my clay, because it's still good. I can still use that clay later. I'm going to tap this just to make sure it's sort of good. And now I'm going to sort of figure out my design here. So we're going to just start off by being very simple. I really just want to do initials. So I'm going to do my initials. And then later on we'll do another project where we get a little more complex with the stamp and design and stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of lay out my sort of initials. So I'm going to kind of figure out this is the top of the J. So I'll go here, sort of here. And I want to use the paper clip right now because I don't want to go too deep. I want to be able to sort of smooth stuff out if I make a mistake or something I don't like. So I'll come up here and see, kind of figure out, am I going to be able to get what I want out of that? I think so. So then I'm going to start, I'm basically going to make an M, but I'm going to use this part here as part of my M, so I'm going to combine the two. It's kind of the way I used to sign my work. I don't do anymore like that, but I use a stamp now, but we can, figure out this old design here. See, I can already kind of see this not working, so I gotta get rid of that. And kind of get this part here flowing first. Then I can come up. I need that other piece right there to be wider. Give myself room here. And I don't like some of that. So what I want to do is move that over, this line over here. That's a nice thing about clay, it's so forgiving. When it's wet like this, I can just keep sort of working on it, because this part here got a little bit too thin. We're going to move this line over there a little bit to give myself some more room. Come up. And since I'm going to be sort of extracting and carving this, I really want, make sure I can get into these spots, because those are going to be the most difficult in these sort of little spots right there. So that, could be good for starters now. Now, I don't want to really carve when it's this wet. I want to let this set up. So what I really want to do is, let it set up before I go back carving. So I have one that I already had let set up. All right. Maybe a little thicker, sort of set up. And what I want to do is just kind of set this on its side and have maybe the bag sort of loosely over it like that for a while I'm doing other things, and then I can kind of go back and forth and check it, as I'm working other places. So now that I have one that sort of has been set up for a while, and the clay is going to come out a lot easier, so I'm just going to use my stirring stick, and I'm going to start sort of extracting this clay. So it's sort of a subtractive sort of technique of it, right? It's almost like, it's basically a sculpture. What we're doing is sort of what we refer to as bas relief. So, in sculpture, you either cast stuff or you subtract it, or you add. So additive or subtractive or things are cast in sculpture. So this is going to be subtractive. So I'm going to subtract the clay around. We could go the other way too, but for our purposes, for what we're going to do with this, we want to have our piece raised just about 1/8 of an inch. Right? It could be a little bit more, between 1/8 and 1/4, but right about 1/8 is actually really good. It's all we need. So I have my stirring stick that I had ground out along the concrete outside, and we can just sort of start taking some of this out. And I don't want to go, I want to be just short of my line for now, and just sort of, start pulling some out. And then, once I get to one point where I think I might kind of want to check and get a sort of a reference, and take my sort of ruler and kind of see how far I'm still only about, it's just under 1/8 right now, so I can go a little bit more, and then I have sort of a reference point right along here where that's how deep I'll want to go, so all the way around. So then I'll just slowly start subtracting the clay all the way around the piece and just kind of build up my little pile of pieces that I've taken out, which I can save and recycle or turn into slip or something like that. And I'll just keep going around until I'm done, and then we'll do sort of some more to it also. Okay, so now that I've carved it, one of the things I want to do is there's a couple things I need to do. I want to smooth off, make sure this is all sort of smooth and a little bit rounded. But because we're going to be using this to like stamp, even if it's in the clay or into the sand for the casting, it's really important that all these walls here are either very vertical or sloped sort of in. So I went through and I took a little piece of my leftover gift card that I made a rib out of, and just as I'm coming up and having sort of it up against the wall there, I push it in a little bit and drag it across. And I went through and did the whole thing like that. So all my walls here are slightly moving in on every side, so that when we press it into something, there's no overhangs that'll grab. Right, so that's really the important sort of part there. And then I decided, you could leave the surface smooth, or I thought maybe I'll put some texture in it and see, if that'll turn out, that'll show up. So I just used actually the back of the nail because it was here, and I kind of tested it on the side a little bit, see what that looked like, and then just went through and put all that in there. So right now I want to make sure that I come along a little bit of water and just kind of smooth the surface there and get the edges. And remember, any little like sort of rough part or things that you leave will show up when you actually use it as a stamp. So we want to hide that stuff. We want to get this kind of edges kind of rounded off and smooth, and then it'll release really easily if it's like that. So so kind of get that. Then also what I did is I wanted to round these edges too, so I kind of dragged this piece over, and then I'll just come back with a little bit of water on there, right, and just sort of kind of make sure that that's sort of rounded off there too. That way when it goes into stuff, it'll release pretty well too. And then on the back, what I did is I carved out these two half circles. And in here I actually want to have an overhang. I want to be able to grab this like that easily and push it down into something. You can usually, hold it like this, but it's nice to have this option here too. And again, I want those edges to be, not real rough either. So I'll just round them off. It doesn't really have to be that way, but it's just a nicer sort of feel of a piece if we can kind of smooth out some of that stuff and round it off. Just so we don't have any sharp edges that are rough when we sort of go and grab it to use it. Then I'll make sure that I put my last name right there so everybody knows who it belongs to, especially since many of us may share the same initials. So I got my name on there. Then one of the last things I do before I kind of let it slowly dry, it's thick so I really want to have it slowly dry, but just to assure that maybe it dries a little more evenly from inside out, I'm going to take my little paper clip and I'm just going to run some holes right here along the side, right there in the middle. And so I'm just basically going to create these little vents so that the water that's in the clay will sort of evaporate from the inside out also, and sort of assures that this will dry a little more evenly and at a better pace, so I can avoid some cracks, stuff like that that could possibly happen when things dry too fast. So I'll just keep going, go all the way around. And the clay was at a good spot where it's, it's soft enough, especially once on the inside, of course, where it's got more water, it's damper. Definitely is still pretty soft, but on the edges there, after it's set up, when you carve it, everything comes out a little cleaner compared to trying to do it when it's very, very wet, when it's just right out of the bag. So this is sort of pretty important to kind of do that. Do that, and if I wanted to, I could also just, kind of run some smaller holes along here, maybe just going halfway up. And that way I'm just going to kind of be pretty confident that it's going to dry nice and even. And then I just want to make sure I sort of dry it flat, and probably just sort of with a plastic bag, just loosely covering it, just kind of like that. And that should be good. That's about all we will need, and just let it go there. And maybe after it sets up a little bit more too, I might come back and just double check that there's some small little spots here and there, and I have myself a little stamp. And I can use this stamp to create another one later that will be the opposite, where it'll be that part there will be sort of recessed. So that should be good there. All right, we'll continue on with more.